So big welcome to everyone. I'm looking forward to today's class, working through an overview in this intensive of what is being covered and what will be covered over the next 12 or 13 weeks. And also then in the second and third session today, looking at ethics and looking at group thinking. Let's begin by opening in prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the opportunity to gather online by Zoom, the opportunity to be prayerfully open to your presence, the opportunity to learn and to grow, and for teaching opportunities of working with students in our schools and with others all around us. Thank you that you're growing us so that we might help others to grow also. Amen. So big welcome. One of your major resources that you'll be using for this subject is the Moodle webpage, and it begins with welcome, introduction, outline of what is being covered, and then there's the 10-minute video introduction there as well as the links for each subject. It's a brief introduction to myself, and also there will be contact details, and you can contact me both through the Alpha Crucis email, but also you can contact me through my personal email, drsamhay@gmail.com. And if you want to contact me, it's often a good idea to try both of those, and that way they'll get through. I tend to read the personal one, Dr. Sam Hay, more often every day, whereas the Alpha Crucis one sometimes gets through, but sometimes takes a bit longer. We also ask you to put up a personal introduction, and many of you have, so a big welcome to each one. And so thank you if you've been able to put up a brief description, sometimes a photo, introducing yourself and background. I think it's great to look through different people, get to know different ones, and at times you may want to send an email or Zoom or contact or link with the different students who are studying this course. It's very valuable to interact with different students. That's a great resource. So thank you each one who's posted. Big welcome to each one, and thank you for posting and introducing yourself and a bit of background there to each one. So that's great. And that helps me to get to know you, and we can get to know each other as well. So thank you there. You could always update that at any stage too, and that will be very useful and helpful. Then you also have a link to information about the subject, and so we have a subject outline. I encourage you to look at that every few weeks to keep in mind the different resources that are being looked at in this subject. So the subject outline is very valuable, and you'll see a resource list there, and you can go to the library online with Alpha Crucis. You'll also see there an overview of what we're seeking to cover each week. So we've got a focus on critical thinking, that is how to think well. And as I'm sure you're all finding, in the classroom, critical thinking is a major part of what you are doing, teaching your students to think in ways that can be different to the organisations they're a part of, different to families that they're a part of, where they're told, don't think, just do. Whereas in a classroom, we're seeking to encourage students to develop skills in thinking for themselves. We're covering that each week. There's also details of the outcomes that we're aiming for. We want to learn about how to think critically, and then we want to learn how our ways of knowing are going to be engaging with our different ways of thinking critically, and also different fields of knowledge, such as science and maths and humanities and history. We're looking at what it means when we say this is the truth, this is what's correct. We're also looking at different types of knowledge and cultural settings of knowledge. And this fits with the Alpha Crucis graduate attributes of building worldview, leadership skills, integrity, communication skills, personal and social skills, and particularly with a focus on critical thinking. We've got a number of strategies that are used. In particular, we want to teach students and yourself how to think, not just what to think. We want to show the different ways in which knowledge is gained, such as observing, such as doing research, such as gathering information. We want to look at higher functioning learning and the advantages of these different ways of knowing. And I find this a fascinating subject because you begin by thinking you just observe, that's the way to think, and then you discover that a lot of knowledge can come in other ways, by intuition, by listening, engaging with other people, so that it becomes more complex and varied as we dig deeper. The search for truth is one of the major challenges of human life, to find out what is really true about what we know. And as Christians, that's one of the challenges, because we sense that God is there, he's speaking to us, he's revealed himself in the Bible, in the Word of God, and so we want to know about that. So teaching and learning strategies are covered, and then each week we go through a number of subjects. And in the next 12 weeks, we're going to encourage you to go through again, looking at what critical thinking is, and then looking at different ways of knowing through our senses. Reasoning's fascinating. Maths, even though you can see 1 + 1 = 2, it applies in so many ways. Even though you can see a triangle, it goes beyond just the senses and observing the angles of a triangle adding up to 180 degrees. Mathematics is a form of reasoning that goes beyond, and many people would say this touches on the God who not only brings the material things into existence, but brings the less material, time and space and geometrics and number theory, all part of the creation that God is bringing into existence. And then last time we looked at language and how language is so important in our thinking and critical thinking. Today, if we get time, we might look further at emotion and intuition, and you'll look at that further in weeks to come. Emotion is so important in ways that we think. Often we're motivated by certain emotions in our thinking, which we may not always acknowledge because they're subconscious. And the students are often motivated to either be attentive or be not attentive by their emotions, what's going on in their subconscious. And then today we'll look at politics and propaganda, and also look at other ways of knowing, and also at ethics, and briefly religious knowledge. So there's a lot of ways of knowing that we cover each week. And then we ask you complete a personal journal, collect resources. That's an unassessed, non-assessed assessment. We also ask that you complete an e-folio where you gather resources. And then this coming week, next week, you do your first of your forum posts. And thank you for those 3 or 4 students who put a forum post up already. And then the week following, you do another forum post, and so on each week for 10 weeks. And then your first of your 2 big assessments is your minor essay. And then you're asked, truth is something never arrived at easily. You've got to work at it, and it's not an easy option. And so you need passion and commitment. And this is from Peter Vardy. So in this second assignment, and I put a video up describing what you can do in that, it's worth thinking a bit about who the author Peter Vardy is. So if you can do a little bit of a looking around to find out about Peter Vardy's background, where's this quote come from, if you could do some research on that. And then looking at Peter Vardy's claim about truth, reflect on the influences that have formed your own personal worldview. So one of the key things in critical thinking is to know yourself. Socrates said, know yourself. Plato encouraged this self-awareness. So in assignment 2, we're asking you to reflect on your views and where they come from, and to identify the key forces that shape your understanding of truth. Can I get everyone to write down now 3 influences on your worldview? So what are 3 influences on your worldview? Someone's asked the question, can you edit your forum post after posting? Yes, I think you're able to. If you can't see an edit function, I'm happy for you to either send me an email. Particularly important will be the forum posts that you hand in at the end of the 12 weeks. So at the end of the 12 weeks, you have a chance to edit your forum posts further, and you have to submit them. And so in order to submit them, then you will have to have them all in one Word document. And so I suggest that you keep adding your forum posts on your computer into one single page Word file. And so you'll add those together, and then you'll just post each one up. But you can certainly edit that document that you have, because that is also what is going to be marked. So you'll be marked 50%, half of your forum posting will be on your weekly what you post, which you can't edit and change, but the other half will be on the record that you keep of your forum post yourself, which you can edit and change, and you will submit. And you'll submit it through Turnitin, which will check that you've not copied it from another student or copied it from anyone or elsewhere. So it's a good idea to have it on one page that you edit and update as well. With the feedback, you may not necessarily get a huge amount of feedback. I'll have a look through, but because there could be 15 or 20 students, and if that is a post a week that we had to work with, then that may not fully, if I had to write half our feedback on each one, then it would add up. So it may not necessarily happen. So I'll certainly go over them each week, but there may not be a huge amount of feedback, seeing how we go with other commitments there. But certainly if you have concerns, happy to give feedback. And often I think I'll give group feedback rather than each individual one, but I'll do some individual feedback where I can. Do we need to post the original post that we comment on at the final Turnitin? No, you can post an updated one, in that I'll be able to see your original post on Moodle. And so I won't necessarily need that, but I'll want the updated one that you've edited and improved on. And then you compile it each week by adding the next post to the previous one in your document that you only post each one in. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to include the post dates, and then it would be good to also include the comment on other people's posts as well. That will lift your grade, and you'll also lift your grade if you include references. And so if you include one reference, that would probably lift your grade by half grade or so. And if you included 2 or 3 references, then that would lift the grade further. And then the content will also lift your grade. And so you can go slightly over the word count in order to lift the content, but it's the quality of the content, not the amount of content. But interacting with 2 or 3 other thinkers and scholars would lift your grade. And if you're wanting to put pictures in, etc., then you could probably put that into Word, but be careful that it doesn't get too there. So you could have screenshots if you wanted. I'm happy to see screenshots there as well. Further questions about the Does anyone want to ask an audio question about the forum posts? Hands up. So all
I think you've answered all my questions, Dr. Hay. Thank you.
Good, good. Hannah.
Sorry, it's just with the compiling. So if we put our post in, then do you want the comments of other people on our post and then the posts we make on others for that week, and then go to like week 2 for the next one? Or do
if you can, yeah, if you can, that would be good. And also, it's often very easy to, if you've got one Word document where you've got it all, and then you're just adding, it can be very easy to quickly do it at the same time you're doing it, cut and paste, and it can be very easy to add date and other reference material there. So that can quickly be done, and it doesn't take so long to do that. So I would encourage you to do that where you can. Let's have a look at some examples of forum posts. So each week you'll go in, and then under assessment task 1, we should have the forum post. So there's details there about the forum posts. All of the post links should work. Occasionally they drop out, and I encourage you to do them each week rather than do 10 at a time. And so if we go into discussion thread 1, let's have a look at these. And so Tiffany, critical thinking, there's some lovely comment on the nature of critical thinking, carefully examining it. I find this is a nice length. It shows a good amount of thought. And now it's just got the one reference there at the end. I would think that could be lifted by having a couple more references. So it's got the one reference. If you added a couple more references, and I'll see it's cited or interacted with other references potentially, and so that lifts it, and the quality there lifts the post as well. So very basic post would get 5 out of 10. A bit more developed would get 6 out of 10, and then highly developed would get 8 or 9 out of 10, and then they're all tallied together. And so that might be around 7 or 8 out of 10 there. So let's have a look if I can find where the others are. Discussion thread 1. And so Mauricia, let's see who's winning in the Commonwealth Games of forum posts. And so Mauricia, looking at resources, thinking skills, how can we teach critical thinking? We've got Ellerton cited here, we've got Ellerton cited down there, and we've got critical workbook cited. So I think they're probably similar responses. I'm wondering whether Mauricia hasn't developed it quite as much, but there's probably not much difference between the two. Do we take a vote? I
did want to add to mine, but then I couldn't edit it. So I'm kind of kicking myself that I uploaded it when I did, but whatever.
Yeah. And that is a bit true, isn't it? I know even you put an assignment in and you think there's still 3 days to go with the assignment. Do I put it in now? And the danger is that if you put it in 3 days early, you might discover next day you didn't do this or that. And then I was talking to someone yesterday.
Though. I won't. In future, I won't post it so early. I'll just work on it in my Word doc and then upload it when I'm finished. So I'm glad it's a lesson I've learned now and not,
not on number 9.
Yeah, so.
Whereas I was in the same boat. I was looking to cut mine, but
yeah, no, that's fine. And then at the end, you can update it as well, and I'll see the difference between your first post and the updated one too. So that will lift the grade on that as well. And then Leonie's as well. I tend to like these developing sort of 3 paragraphs rather than 1 paragraph. I think that lifts it. 2 cited references rather than 1 cited reference, I think that tends to lift it. So I think Leonie's maybe in the lead of the Commonwealth Games of forum posts for today, but this is not the final competition. This is just the initial rounds of competition. So that gives you an idea as to what people are doing, an idea of what works. And with first person, again, I would think that 2/3 of your forum post should be in the 3rd person, scholar so-and-so says. If you want 1/3 of your forum post to be in the 1st person, then you could do that, but first person is harder to use. Yes.
I just have a question. Referencing, when we reference, should we be referencing the resources we've already been given, or do we not need to reference those because we were given those? Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. I would certainly reference all resources, including those you have been given. And if you can quickly expand out and find 1 or 2 or 3 other references that are interesting, then I think that lifts it as well. And then, look out for higher quality references by stronger scholars. One resource that I find very, very good is Google Scholar. So scholar.google.com is so useful. And so if you put critical thinking for teaching education into Google Scholar, you've got great resources come up here very, very quickly. And you could even put, cross-cultural, other things that you might want to look at. And that will bring up other resources here. And often they're quite scholarly resources. So thank you each one for those who are starting to put the forum posts up. And then also, one of the things that we'll be able to do is every 2 weeks or so, things going well, we'll be able to discuss how you've gone with those previous 2 weeks and with your forum posts as well. So that will be useful at the same time. Any other questions about the forum posts? So let's have a look at the forum post materials that we are covering each week, because there's quite interesting topics that are covered there each week. So next week, you've got 7 days. I think probably it would be Sunday to Saturday, but you could make it a day difference if you wish. So you're thinking about how children, students learn, how we can teach critically, and there's also this other workbook. And if that opens up as well, you've got a resource on critical thinking. So this is a chance in week 1 to think about what's happening with critical thinking. How do you teach it in the classroom? What are you doing when you teach students to think critically? Are there fun activities that you can do in order to teach critical thinking? And then in week 2 and 3, we look at Plato and Socrates and their emphasis on questions and critical thinking. So there's lots of ways in which you can develop skills in critical thinking. So that's a resource there. And then there are other resources as well. You could find lots more. So basically week 1 is discussing the whole question of critical thinking and how we teach critical thinking. Then in week 2, we're looking at Plato and Aristotle and their ideas about critical thinking. And that raises the very interesting concept of Plato's cave. And I've even heard others use this analogy of we don't know so much because we like people at one end of a cave, and we like the safety of the cave, so we don't go out and see the much bigger world that's outside the cave. So that's Plato's idea is that our view of the world is just shadows and not really the big reality that's out there. And so this is a chance to think about, was Plato right when he said there's a bigger world out there beyond the cave? And as Christians, C.S. Lewis and others would say that faith in God can help us to step outside the limitations of the cave and see the bigger world. I find it fascinating as you grow up from primary school to high school to tertiary studies, the world gets bigger and bigger as you begin to see there's much, much more out there. Week 2. Week 3, we're looking at Christian perspectives and the teaching methods of Jesus. Week 4, we're looking at ignorance and why some people miss out on seeing things, particularly in history. And we're looking at Augustine as an example, 400 AD, and we can go to the primary resource on Augustine there, and you can read Augustine, and you could read primary resources by Augustine. You could Google Augustine and his resources. There's another one on education theory of Augustine. If you want to go further, you could write Augustine, his confessions online, his writings online, free download, something like that. And you'd find that they had Gutenberg books and other resource pages will give you access to his books. So you could read some of Augustine's books that were written 400 AD. And so I encourage you to. Often critical thinking's improved by reading the original resources that a scholar or thinker has written. And I've met a number of students who've said reading Augustine's writings have been life-changing. What he wrote in 400 AD can be very, very impacting. And certainly the Confessions of Augustine, his personal reflection on his life journey, which is similar. This was his assignment too. This course, you may not realise, is quite old. It's been run for 1,500 years. And this is the essay handed in by Augustine in 400 AD. I may be older than I look. And so Augustine writes about his own personal reflections there. Any questions? And so back to, so that's week 4. Augustine as an example of someone in history who's been writing. Week 5, mathematics. And week 5, we talk a little bit about overcoming the fear of mathematics. So there's certain subjects that students may have a fear of, and mathematics may be one of those. Hands up anyone here who has a little bit of maths phobia, bit of scared. Yep, so you're not alone. Something like that. Does anyone here have music phobia? And so, yes. Janelle, what can you tell me about reasons why we, I think there's been experiences I've had that could possibly give me music phobia. What gives some people music phobia?
So out of my element, even when we go into the music class, I've done a lot of my work in a high school as well. And I just find myself as a learning and support officer so useless to my students. So I'm just like, have nothing. We learn the same thing week in, week out, and then every different section of students. And I just don't retain it at all. So it's just something that's not familiar to me, and I find it quite hard. So I don't mind engaging and try my hardest at it, but I don't retain it at all. So it does scare me like that.
Yeah, I find a bit the same. I went to a school for a while in St Leonard's in Tasmania, and Peter Sculthorpe studied piano in the same room and everything that I studied at in the same school. And when he went to his first piano lesson, he was so excited, he went home and he started to compose music on the piano, and he wrote down his composition. And when he went back for his piano lesson next week, he got the cane for composing because this subject is not about composing. This subject is about practicing the scales that you have been told to practice. Actually, he then went on to become one of Australia's great composers, so he ignored that guideline that was given by his teacher, and he became a very great and famous composer. Even this last week or two, I went into a tech area in a school, and the students were making cubby houses, and they were all identical and the same. And I said, can't you be creative? Can't you make one like a castle and such forth? And they said, no, there is no originality, etc. in this. You're going to have some students who are wanting to be creative, aren't you? So it's quite challenging, the whole education process. And mathematics can be one of those subjects. As can you be creative with mathematics, accounting, and can you be creative with science? And yeah, creativity is one of those things that gets challenged. But week 5, we're going to look at mathematics, and we'll see that it can be interesting, exciting, and it shouldn't give us phobias. We can enjoy it. A bit like me on the piano. I've recent years, I've got back on the piano, even though at times piano teachers can make it very scary, can't they, as well? Any others with music phobia? And Tiffany, do you want to tell us about your experience with music and phobia?
I don't know where I developed this phobia, but it's come to light. My daughter actually is very musical, and my in-laws are all in the theatre and very musical. She started keyboard lessons, and the keyboard teacher would give us notes and say, you know, this is what she needs to practice at home. She has a keyboard in her room. She can do it herself, but you know, you need to watch and help and assist, as she's only 5. So I'm there trying to watch, and everything sounds the same to me. I have no idea. There's no rhythm. I haven't got a musical body in my body. And I'll tell her, oh, you need to do this. No, you're completely wrong, Mum. I don't know.
Yeah.
No idea.
And I was talking to one student about a year ago, and I got them very excited with piano and music, and they downloaded the program on their computer, and they were composing on their computer, and they had about 3 to 6 months of great excitement. And I didn't see them for a few weeks or a month, and then I said, you know, let's have a look at some music things, and they said, no, I don't have ability in music, and they didn't want to go near it. So something had happened in the intervening period where they've been told you don't have ability in that area, you got ability in sport, and for others you don't have ability in sport, therefore, yeah. So it is incredible how lots of different subjects can give people joy and can give people a sense of pain and a sense that it's torture. So that's week 5, mathematics and its joys and fears. Week 6, we'll encourage you to look at science. And anyone got science phobia? And yeah, so Rachel, tell us a little bit. And I think you've mentioned before, Rachel, too, is that science doesn't give you such joy. But just in a couple of sentences, Rachel, what is it about science that doesn't give you joy?
I don't mind chemistry. I actually kind of enjoyed chemistry, but I think that was because it was a lot more hands-on and like the basic side of it. But I hate any science that is sit down and you have to do maths and formulas. And I just struggle with that, for one, because I struggle with math and I don't like math. But it's just like, it's something about science that I don't mind doing it with my year 4s, but get me to do anything to do with high school science, I will literally run away from you.
Yeah, so and I think a lot of people share that experience. If you do year 11, 12 physics, year 11, 12 calculus, there's all sorts of subjects that can be a bit scary like that. At university level, students who sign up for engineering will often find that they've got great dreams and hopes. And then in the first year or so of engineering at university, the mathematics can be quite challenging. In week 7, we then move more into the humanities, and we look at storytelling, and we also look at language further. And week 8, we look further at ways of knowing. Week 9, We then move into ethics, which we'll touch on in sessions today. And then week 10 in your forum posts, we look at culture, and we also look at the specific challenge of racism. So they're the topics that will be covered each week in the forum posts. So they're quite interesting, and I'm sure you'll get value out of each of those. You'll learn something in each one, and there'll be a lot of value in those as well. So I look forward to seeing your engagement with those forum posts over each week. So I'll read through them as they go up each week, and I may be able to give some feedback as well. Though every 2 weeks, we might be able to give some group feedback, and it's in the group feedback that we might be able to give a lot more detail, I think. So we've talked about assessment 2, we've talked about the forum posts, and then I might mention assessment 3, and there's quite a lot of details about assessment 3 in the subject outline. So I encourage you with assessment 2 and assessment 3 to have a careful look at the subject outline and to think through what is needed for those. And at some stage, 10 hours a week should be put into the subject, and 5 hours a week could be put into the essays. So with the minor essay, you're looking at your own worldview and your understandings of truth. Can I get you, we ask you to write down around 3 things that have shaped your worldview. Can I ask Karen and then Hannah as examples of things that have shaped their worldview to tell me what they have written down? So
sure. My worldview is good versus evil.
Black and white.
Mm.
And that seems to be quite an important value in your life, the value of good and the concern for understanding evil. And there's a battle between them. Tell us a bit more about that view of the world, Karen.
Well, I find that it's difficult when you've got an environment where you follow your morals, then you have close contacts that have possibly different views, and therefore you struggle with your own morals to accept their way of thinking, and you've got to find a happy balance in between the two. It is difficult. I even have this issue at home with my husband. He's a correctional officer, and as you can appreciate, he works with some not so nice people. Well, not works with, but is engaged with every day. Yeah. And I have found, like, he's been doing that job for over 20 years, and I've found since we've been together that he has changed his views on a lot of things which we clash about. So his empathy, his racial thoughts and things like that. And I think that's where it comes down to the good versus evil, where I try to find the good in everybody, yet he comes back and says, well, no, this is what this person did, but you can't put everyone into the same basket.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big topic we'll think about a bit further today. And in the week that we look at ethics, is that some people will have values that see everyone as good. They want to see, they're optimists. And I met a couple the other day, married couple, and he was so optimistic. And any difficulty that came along in life, car got scratched or whatever, you know, there is good going to come out of everything. Whereas his wife was so pessimistic. And so, and we have to recognise that in the class, we can have optimists and pessimists. In staff room, teachers can be optimists and pessimists. So we have to recognise that these are different worldviews that are held by different teachers and values, and amongst Christians. And so you can have Christians that are very optimistic, Christians that are very pessimistic. And so even though we may go to the same church, etc., we can see things in quite different ways. Someone else want to expand on the good versus evil worldview and values, who identifies a little bit with that? Anyone else got thoughts on what are the things that have shaped your worldview, shaped the way you see your world? Someone else?
I'm happy if
Yeah.
if everyone's happy for me just to jump in. That whole good versus evil thing, and like Karen was saying, particularly when she spoke about her husband and how she's noticed over time his sort of view has changed. Like I very much, every person I meet or even situation or whatever, I'm quite curious about the backstory, how someone came to arrive at that place. So I think I am a little bit of an optimist in that I think inside everyone there is this good, and quite often, they come across with certain ideas and beliefs because of the experiences they've had, and especially like Karen's husband, and I know some police officers as well who are really quite racist, and I find that quite difficult to sort of listen to, but that's shaped by their experience, and because it's this sort of day in, day out experience, their view then becomes really quite narrow, I think, because it's just they're bombarded with it. And that's when you're living in this little environment, you don't sort of take a step back and look at the big picture. You can, I think, sort of just get fixated on this, oh, well, this is what I observe. And then that sort of comes back to critical thinking skills, I think, too, in that, why do I think these things? Why do I think this is true? So it's just constantly being curious. And then three influences that obviously, like I am influenced in that way, in that like my curiosity about life and everything in it has developed over time because of my experiences in life. So
yeah. That's so good. And it relates to how jobs and vocations influence a person's thought, and a person's thought influences their suitability to jobs and vocations. And so some people are very suited to being counsellors and guidance because that's where their strength is. Tiffany?
I just have a comment of backing off Mauricia's and Karen's statements. I think it's also important to remember, I'm probably biased in my personal experience. I have a brother who's done wrong and is in jail and all whatnot. We were both raised in the same home, the same parents. We are very different people. So I think it's also important to remember that your background, yes, does shape you, and where you grew up and what you've learned from your parents and things does shape you, but we're also all humans and able to change, go through wrong things. I mean, some people don't change. That's very true. But we all can be brought up in the same environment and have different opinions and different ways of living.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And they're the sort of things we're looking at in assignment 2. We're looking at what's the background, your church background, your family background, all of those things that might shape your view of the world. But we want you to be aware that out of 25 students in the classroom, and you could certainly write on this in the assignment, that you're going to have students from different backgrounds. And you could write about psychological difference, introverts and extroverts. You could write about those who are happy to sit still and those who can't sit still. How do we cope with all of these differences in our classroom? And so factors that can be included in this discussion include particular ways in which we approach something like maths and number acquisition. And we've said already, some people they love numbers. I know a young boy who thrives on anything to do with numbers, but others not so good. And yet others thrive on language and literacy. And then we could also consider how do we assess all these differences, and what are your experiences in being assessed? There'd be times when assessment's gone very well for you, and times when assessment has not gone so well. And you could reflect on that. And classroom and behaviour management can be considered there as well. Hannah, your thoughts?
Sorry, I just had a quick question about assignment number 2. For at least the first part of the assignment, the first point, are we writing that in more first person or third person still?
Yeah, all assignments should be written as much as possible in the third person, but again, it can be very useful to keep a diary and to write down, on this date, I reflected on my experiences of assessment, and then you could then move from your diary into your assignment and shorten it down a huge amount when you do. And you could say the author of this essay, in reflecting on their assessment experience, finds that there have been times that. So that way you've got 2 records of it, one in the first person, which is in your diary, and then one where you move it into your essay in the third person. So there's quite a few different topics that you could cover in the second assignment. Briefly, in the third assignment, we then expand this to 2 Indigenous groups. So one has to be an Australian Aboriginal group. So you choose one of the nations in Australia, maybe one near where you are, and then you choose one other Indigenous group, and you then look at and compare those, and you compare those a little bit with what you found about your own worldview in assignment 2. Now, in assignment number 3, there's a lot of educational concerns flow out of this. You need some way to blend all this into one flowing assignment. So you want an introduction that talks about how the way students think and the way they approach critical thinking varies between cultures. And in this essay, I will be looking at an Aboriginal culture and another culture, and it could be a migrant culture or a Maori culture or any one of a number of other cultures. And then a knowledge and understanding of these different cultures helps us in education. In particular, it helps us when assessing. And so in assessment, we're aware of these cultural differences, and so written assessment may not be as appropriate to some students. When it comes to keeping accurate and reliable records in teaching, an awareness of the cultural differences can remind us that we can make a note in a sensitive way, because we have to be careful not to label. And then you quickly go to Google Scholar, and you could look at labeling. And so, you know, the dangers of cultural labeling, and you'd put that into Google Scholar. So it'd be scholar.google, and you'd put in the dangers of cultural labeling in education. And so then you'd look through for some resources that tell you about dangers of labeling there. So that's assignment number 3. Feedback strategies, be aware of these cultural differences, but you want a fairly large amount of that assignment analysing, examining these 2 cultural groups. So between now and then, you could keep an eye out and gather material on that. The assessment rubric reminds us that in the forum posts, we're looking for a range of philosophical positions with scholarly support and their relationship to effective classroom practice and context. So that's the forum posts, and they'll be graded along those lines. Assignment 2, we're looking at the influences that shape personal worldview and their impact on teaching and organisational processes in the effective education of young students. So you've got the rubric guidelines there. We're looking at different ways of knowing. And so you could focus here on 2 or 3 ways of knowing. So you could mention scientific knowledge, or you could mention observation, you could mention mathematical knowledge. You could choose a subject that you are going to focus on in this ways of knowing. So that could strengthen. You wouldn't want to go more than 2 or 3 at the most ways of knowing. So you've got literacy, numeracy, and then you're going to want to evaluate different assumptions, perspectives, ideas. So you've got good resources there, and then you're wanting to present it well. And then in the third assignment, we're looking similarly at these 2 Indigenous group examples, and we're looking, potentially you could also look at a couple of subject areas there. So details on the assignment are given, and details of some potential references that you could interact with are given there as well. Any questions about assignment 2 and assignment 3 or the forums?
And just one question I have, with the layout of the assignment, is that on Moodle?
I think it may. Does someone else have an answer to that, whether the layout, Alpha Crucis has given you some examples there of the layout? The best format to complete your assignment in, I think, is Word. Some students put it into PDF, but then we have to convert that back to Word. So Word is a much better resource. Being in Word, I think you are given some guidelines about having a cover page. So I think that's important. You have to make a decision as to whether you have a contents page. How many people, hands up, tend to put a contents page after their cover page? Anyone? So it doesn't look like students going there. How many people put a contents page? First page gives a bit of detail there. You go straight into the essay, many students do perhaps. Yep. Yep. No, I'm happy to fit in with the pattern that's unfolding in each of your subjects. So consistency with the guidelines that are given, I think, is the most important thing there. And also,
sorry, where do we actually find the guidelines set out by Alpha Crucis on, say, title page, footer, header, like the thing, font size?
Yep.
Thanks, Hannah.
There should be, in just the actual Alpha Crucis student handbook, there's a part on assessments, and it's like, it prefers this style font, this, unless specified by your lecturer otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Marisha, it does actually say. Oh, sorry, whoever.
Yeah, sorry, the other part is because we do APA referencing, they also have some extra added bits like your page number in the top right, things like that. So if you look at both the student handbook and the APA system and then kind of merge the two together is what I've been.
Marisha, it does also say somewhere about Times New Roman font, size 12, double spacing and stuff like that.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. So good. So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Hannah. That's very, very good. Very, very helpful. Yep. And then, so the handbook certainly, and also the subject outline details that you've got here as well are very, very useful for that. So I think that's covered most of the guidelines of what we are looking at. So let's take our break there for 10 minutes. We come back in 10 minutes time. And again, we might spend a little bit of time going over this is the outline of what we're covering, and then we'll probably leave the 2 assignments then. You've been given some information, and there's videos introducing those assignments. and we'll have a look at the subjects that we cover. But certainly at the beginning, when we come back in 10 minutes time, if you have further questions, happy to answer those as well. Thank you. See you shortly.